In the middle of a raging snowstorm, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, a lone man hears a knock at his door. When Adam Cole opens it, he doesn't find a lost traveler. He finds her. A woman unlike any he has ever seen. Violet skin, glowing green eyes, a presence that feels both powerful and fragile. Sera is no ordinary woman. She is a queen without a throne, hunted across the stars. She offers Adam something no human woman ever could. But with her comes danger. A past filled with betrayal. And an empire on the verge of rebellion. Will Adam risk everything for a love that was never meant to be? Or will the forces chasing her consume them both? Stay until the end for the most shocking twist. Like, comment, and subscribe to Alien Love Chronicles for more epic alien love stories. Your support helps us create even more thrilling videos. The wind howled through the trees like the anguished cries of ghosts, rattling the wooden walls of the isolated cabin. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, burying the world outside in an endless white void. The storm had been raging for hours, relentless and unforgiving, turning the vast Alaskan wilderness into a frozen graveyard. Inside, Adam Cole sat before the crackling fire, the only source of warmth in his cold, solitary world. His cabin was small but sturdy, a sanctuary he had built for himself after years of choosing isolation over the chaos of civilization. He preferred it this way: the silence, the distance, the certainty that no one could find him here. But something felt different tonight. The unease had crept up on him slowly, a gnawing sensation in the back of his mind that he couldn't shake. He had spent enough time in the wild to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him that something was wrong. Then, it happened. A brilliant blue-green light split the sky outside, so bright it momentarily turned the entire forest into an eerie daylight. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and a distant boom echoed through the valley. Not lightning, not a meteor, something else, something unnatural. Adam stood, muscles tensing as he reached for his rifle. He moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see outside. The snowstorm obscured everything beyond a few feet, but in the distance, past the tree line, he could see an otherworldly glow flickering between the branches, illuminating the falling snow with an unnatural hue. Then, a knock. A sharp, deliberate knock against the wooden door. Adam froze. No one came out here. Not unless they were lost, or stupid, or dangerous. He moved swiftly, years of solitude and survival sharpening his instincts. He pressed his back against the wall beside the door, shotgun raised, and took a slow, steady breath. Another knock, this one weaker, almost desperate. He yanked the door open, and there she was. A woman, at least she looked like one, stood in the doorway, barely holding herself upright. She was tall, her body lean but toned, carrying the presence of a warrior despite the exhaustion evident in every trembling muscle. Her skin, a deep violet hue, shimmered faintly in the firelight, smooth as polished stone, yet marked with barely visible scars. Her long black hair clung to her face, damp from the storm, strands whipping in the wind. And then there were her eyes, luminous green, glowing like twin stars in the darkness, staring straight into his with an intensity that sent a chill through his spine. Her lips parted, breathless, her voice barely a whisper above the wind. "Let me stay here, and I'll give you what no human woman can." Adam didn't move. His grip on the shotgun tightened, his mind racing. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was anything but. It was not a plea. It was a bargain. A proposition laced with something unspoken, something dangerous. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the cold, there was defiance in her gaze. She was not just some helpless woman lost in the storm. She was something else, something far more dangerous. Adam's instincts screamed at him to slam the door shut, to pretend he had never seen her. But he didn't. There was something in those glowing eyes, something that held him captive in the few seconds that passed between them. A challenge, an unspoken truth, a warning. The storm howled louder behind her, whipping snow into the cabin. Her body swayed slightly, the last of her strength slipping away. Adam stepped aside. "Get in," he said. She moved without hesitation, slipping past him into the warmth of the cabin, her soaked clothes clinging to every curve of her body. The door slammed shut behind her, muting the storm to a distant roar. She exhaled sharply, pressing her back against the wooden wall, her shoulders slumping slightly, as if the weight of the night had finally caught up to her. But her eyes remained sharp, wary, flicking around the cabin, taking in everything. The old furniture, the hunting rifle mounted above the fireplace, the scent of smoke and cedar lingering in the air. Adam didn't lower the shotgun. "Start talking," he ordered, his voice flat. She lifted her head, those eerie green eyes locking onto his. "If you keep that gun pointed at me much longer," she murmured, "you won't like what happens next." There was no arrogance in her tone, no threat, just a certainty that sent a different kind of chill through him. Adam had spent enough time around dangerous people to recognize controlled power when he saw it. She wasn't weak. She was hiding her strength. He took a measured step closer, asserting control over the situation. "I don't like games," he said. "You show up out of nowhere looking like something out of a fever dream, and you expect me to just let you in without questions?" She didn't flinch. "I don't have time to explain," she said, her voice low. "But if you let me stay, I will give you something no human woman can." Adam studied her, the way she held herself despite her exhaustion, the tension in her muscles, ready to move at the slightest threat, the way her eyes darted, not in fear, but in calculation. She wasn't just running. She was being hunted. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. Her gaze flicked past him, toward the frost-covered window. The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, but he knew whatever had brought her here wasn't just the storm. She turned back to him. "I don't have time to explain," she repeated. "But if you let me stay, I swear to you, Adam Cole, you will never regret it." His name on her lips made every hair on his arm stand on end. He had never told her his name. Adam exhaled slowly, setting his shotgun down on the table, but within reach. "Fine," he muttered. "You can stay." Something flickered in her gaze, relief, but only for a second. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Because whatever she was running from was still out there. The fire flickered in the dimly lit cabin, casting restless shadows on the walls. Adam sat across from the strange woman, his mind still struggling to process what had just unfolded. His hands were steady, though his thoughts were anything but. He worked methodically, pressing a clean cloth against the wound on her shoulder, watching as the deep gash oozed a faint, silvery fluid that shimmered in the low light. It wasn't blood, not like any he had seen before. It was thicker, almost metallic in its consistency, and it carried a scent unlike anything human. Not coppery, not organic, but something colder, sharper, like the bite of ozone in the air after a lightning strike. Sera Valeris. That was the name she had given him, but it meant nothing to him. She sat still beneath his touch, though her body remained tense like a coiled spring. Up close, she was even stranger than he had first thought. Her violet-hued skin, though marred by bruises and scrapes, possessed an almost luminous quality, as if it were absorbing the firelight rather than merely reflecting it. Faint lines of glowing patterns, intricate, delicate, ran across her forearms and neck, pulsing ever so slightly, as though they were alive. He didn't understand what he was looking at, but he understood danger when he saw it. "You need stitches," he muttered, reaching for a roll of gauze, but she shook her head. "Number it will heal." Adam narrowed his eyes, but he said nothing. He had spent enough years in the military to recognize someone avoiding questions. And Sera, whoever she was, had more secrets than she was willing to admit. As he pressed the bandage into place, his fingers brushed against her skin. A jolt, not painful, not exactly electric, but something, rushed up his arm, a foreign pulse of warmth that settled deep in his chest before vanishing just as quickly. His breath hitched. Sera inhaled sharply and pulled away, her glowing green eyes flickering toward him with something unreadable. He flexed his fingers, willing away the sensation. What the hell was that? Sera hesitated, but before she could answer, something outside the cabin shifted. A sound. Distant, but deliberate. Adam froze, ears straining against the howling wind. At first it was subtle, barely distinguishable from the storm raging outside. But then he heard it again, closer this time. A faint hum, a vibration in the air, like the thrumming of an engine hovering just beyond the tree line. He turned toward the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to see beyond the frost-covered glass. His stomach clenched. There, cutting through the night like a silent predator, was something that did not belong in this world. A sleek, black aircraft hovered just beyond the cabin, its edges blending seamlessly with the darkness. Red lights flickered along its underside, casting eerie streaks of color against the snow-covered ground. It made no sound beyond that low, unnatural hum, a technology far beyond anything Earth had developed. Then came the voices. Muffled at first, then clearer as they drew closer. Adam reached for his shotgun, his grip tightening around the worn stock as the heavy crunch of boots on snow reached his ears. These weren't lost hikers. These weren't people from the nearest town, looking for shelter. Whoever they were, they had come for her. Sera was already on her feet, moving toward the window with silent precision. Her posture had changed. No longer the exhausted woman seeking refuge, but something sharper, more focused. A predator preparing for the inevitable. A deep mechanical voice crackled through the air, emitted from a device one of the soldiers carried. "We know you're here, Sera Valeris. Don't be foolish." Adam felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. They weren't asking. They knew. Sera's breath came slow and measured, but her hands had curled into fists. Adam glanced at her, searching her face, looking for something. Fear, panic. But all he saw was cold determination. She turned toward him then, her glowing eyes locking onto his, her expression unreadable. "They won't let you live," she said softly. "Even if you give me up. They'll kill you. Just for seeing me." Adam studied her, his pulse steady despite the storm raging inside his mind. This was it. The moment where he could make the easy choice, the logical choice. He could hand her over, let them take her, pretend this never happened, and continue his life in the silence of the Alaskan wilderness. Or he could do the one thing he'd always been best at. Fight. Adam exhaled slowly, lifting his shotgun, racking a shell into place. The sound was deafening in the quiet cabin. "Then we make sure they don't take you." Sera blinked. Something in her posture shifted, just slightly. Approval. Outside, the soldiers moved closer. Adam counted at least 5 figures weaving through the trees, their movements calculated, precise. Trained killers. He had fought men like this before. The red glow of a scanner swept across the cabin door, pulsing faintly as it analyzed the structure. Adam's grip tightened on the shotgun. He had maybe seconds before they breached. His gaze flicked to Sera. "If you've got any tricks up your sleeve," he muttered, "now would be a damn good time." She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the center of the room, rolling back the sleeve of her torn jacket. One of the glowing lines on her forearm pulsed brighter, shifting, reshaping itself into something mechanical, something alive. A weapon. Adam barely had time to register what he was seeing before the first explosion hit. The front door shattered inward, splintering into 1,000 pieces as a surge of energy tore through it. The force sent Adam skidding back, his shoulder slamming into the table, knocking the breath from his lungs. 3 figures moved into the cabin, clad in dark armor, their visors glowing with a cold, sterile light. Adam didn't hesitate. He fired. The blast from his shotgun ripped through the first soldier's chest, sending him staggering back, but his armor absorbed most of the impact. The second one raised his weapon. Adam dove just as the energy blast shot past him, searing into the wooden wall behind him. Then Sera moved. She was fast, inhumanly fast, closing the distance between herself and the nearest soldier in a heartbeat. Her weaponized arm pulsed, a blade of pure energy extending from her wrist, slicing through the soldier's chest plate as if it were paper. He crumpled without a sound. The third one turned toward her. Too slow. Sera twisted, her hand darting out, gripping the soldier's helmet, slamming his head against the wall with a sickening crack. Silence. Adam caught his breath, his grip still firm on the shotgun. Sera turned toward him, eyes blazing. "They'll send more," she said. Adam wiped a hand across his mouth, exhaling sharply. "Then we'd better not be here when they do." The cold night air bit at Adam's skin as he sprinted through the snow, his boots sinking with each desperate step. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, every muscle in his body coiled tight with adrenaline. Behind him, the remnants of his once quiet life burned. His cabin reduced to a smoldering wreck, the snow around it illuminated by the eerie red glow of the enemy's searchlights. The sounds of pursuit were close, too close. Heavy boots crunching against ice, distant shouts cutting through the howling wind, the unmistakable hum of something unnatural hovering just beyond the tree line. Ahead, Sera moved with unearthly precision, barely leaving footprints in the snow. Though battered and weakened, she was still faster than any human, her glowing green eyes scanning the darkness as if she could see paths where none existed. Adam didn't know where she was leading him, but he didn't have much of a choice. A sharp crack split the air, a warning shot, aimed just over his shoulder. Adam gritted his teeth and pushed forward, heart pounding. The snow-covered landscape stretched endlessly ahead. But there was no time to think about the impossibility of escape. If they stopped, they were dead. Then Sera veered sharply to the right, disappearing behind an outcropping of jagged ice. Adam followed without hesitation, his fingers tightening around the shotgun still slung over his shoulder. As soon as he rounded the corner, the ground beneath him changed. It wasn't the powdery snow he had trudged through moments ago. It was smooth, metallic, artificial. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he took in the sight before him. Partially buried beneath the thick layers of ice was something enormous, an angular structure, dark metal peeking through the frozen layers, pulsing with a faint blue glow. It wasn't natural. It wasn't anything that belonged here. Sera didn't stop moving. She ran toward the structure, pressing her palm against a barely visible panel on its surface. The response was immediate. A deep vibration rumbled through the ice, and then, with a soft hiss, a hidden doorway appeared, revealing a dimly lit interior. "Inside! Now!" she commanded. Adam didn't hesitate. He followed her into the structure just as another round of energy fire sizzled through the air where he had stood seconds before. The doorway sealed shut behind them, silencing the storm outside. The sudden shift from biting cold to the artificial stillness inside the craft sent a shock through his system. The interior of the vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls pulsed faintly, the metal itself seeming to breathe in sync with some unseen power source. Strange glyphs, unreadable but intricate, ran along the curved surfaces, glowing softly as they detected movement. Sera pressed her hand against a panel, and the ship rumbled to life. The floor beneath them vibrated slightly, the faint hum of energy traveling through the walls. Adam took a cautious step forward, glancing around. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "My ship," Sera replied without looking at him. "And our only way out of here." She moved with practiced efficiency, fingers dancing over controls that looked impossibly complex. Adam barely had time to process what was happening before the ship lurched beneath them. A low, thrumming noise reverberated through the hull, and then, movement. He staggered slightly as the ship rose, the force pressing against his legs before stabilizing. A screen flickered to life on the nearest wall, displaying a live feed of the outside. The snowy Alaskan landscape shrank beneath them, and the red searchlights of their pursuers frantically scanned the ground. But it was too late. They were leaving. The sky darkened as they ascended, the swirling storm clouds parting to reveal a vast, endless blackness dotted with distant stars. Adam moved toward the viewport, his hands bracing against the frame as he looked out. His breath caught. The earth was falling away beneath them. He had seen pictures before, satellite images, footage from space stations, but nothing had prepared him for this. From up here, his entire world was nothing more than a glowing sphere of blue and green, suspended in the void. No borders, no cities, no roads. Just a fragile, beautiful planet hanging in the vast emptiness of space. It should have terrified him. The knowledge that there was no turning back, that whatever lay ahead was unknown, incomprehensible, that he had abandoned everything familiar in the span of mere minutes. But instead, all he felt was a strange, unsettling calm. Sera moved beside him, watching his face. "Breathe," she said quietly. Adam exhaled slowly, forcing his fingers to unclench. "I never planned on leaving," he admitted. She didn't look away from the viewport. Neither did I. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence of space wrapped around them, vast and infinite. The ship continued to rise, its trajectory adjusting as it left the planet's orbit. Adam turned to her, his voice quieter now. "Where are we going?" Sera's expression was unreadable. "Far away from here." That wasn't an answer. Not really. But then again, nothing about this situation had easy answers. He let out a humorless breath and leaned back against the cool metal wall. He had thought Alaska was the farthest he could run, the most isolated he could become. He had been wrong, because now, he wasn't just off the grid, he wasn't even on the planet, and there was no going back. The ship moved silently through the vast expanse of space, leaving behind the familiar blue sphere that had been Adam's home. The hum of the engine was the only sound breaking the silence, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat against the cold, infinite void. He sat at the edge of the pilot's seat, watching the swirling patterns of distant nebulae stretch across the viewport. The sight should have been overwhelming, awe-inspiring, terrifying even. But his mind was too preoccupied with the woman sitting across from him. Sera. She had spent most of the journey in silence, her glowing green eyes fixed on the endless stretch of darkness before them. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of quiet contemplation, but Adam could sense the weight pressing on her shoulders. It was the same burden he had seen in soldiers who had lost too much and carried too many ghosts. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on now?" His voice was steady, but beneath it was the quiet demand for the truth. Sera didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to face him, her gaze flickering with something he couldn't quite place. For a long moment, she just looked at him, as if deciding how much she was willing to say. Then, finally, she spoke. "My name is Serafina Valeris," she said. "I was once the ruler of a world called Valeria." Adam didn't flinch, but something shifted in his posture. A ruler? He let the word settle, rolling it over in his mind. "Like a queen?" Sera's lips curled slightly, though there was no humor in it. "Yes, but not anymore." The weight in her voice told him everything. This wasn't just someone running from a bad situation. This was someone who had lost everything. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "All right. I'll bite. If you were a queen, why the hell are you here, running for your life in a broken-down ship?" Sera's expression darkened. "Because I was betrayed." She leaned back against the seat, her fingers absently tracing the faint, glowing lines on her arm. The intricate markings pulsed softly like veins filled with liquid light. "My world was once an empire that stretched across star systems, a civilization built on strength, knowledge, and unity. For generations my bloodline ruled, not as dictators, but as guardians. We kept the balance between power and order." Adam listened, not interrupting. There was a tone to her voice that was different now. Something old. Something buried beneath the exhaustion. This wasn't just a story. This was history. "But there were those who believed my rule was a weakness," she continued. "A man named Darius Kane, my most trusted general, led a coup against me. He convinced my own council that I was unfit to rule, that Valeria needed a stronger hand, a ruler who would not hesitate to use force to control its people." Her voice dipped lower, and for the first time, Adam saw something flicker in her eyes. Not anger, not sorrow, guilt. "They turned on me," she admitted. "The ones I trusted most, my own people." Kane took control, declared himself supreme commander. and wiped out anyone who still swore loyalty to me. Within days, the empire I had fought to protect was no longer mine. Adam's fingers tightened into a fist. He wasn't sure why, but the thought of it, of her being betrayed by the very people she had sworn to protect, hit something deep inside him. "So they exiled you?" he asked. Sera let out a hollow breath. "Worse. They tried to erase me. They wanted the people to believe I had died, that my reign had ended by natural means. But I escaped before they could finish the job." Adam studied her, his mind fitting the pieces together. A queen betrayed. A rebellion crushed before it could begin. And now, she was here, stranded in the vastness of space with nothing but a dying ship, and a stranger who had no reason to trust her. His lips pressed into a thin line. "So what's your plan? Hide forever?" For the first time, a spark of something lit in her gaze. "Number I will take back what was stolen from me." Adam scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "With what army?" "In case you haven't noticed, it's just you and me right now." Sera met his eyes, unwavering. "It's not about an army," she said. "It's about the truth. If the people of Valeria knew I was alive, if they knew what Cain had done, they would rise. But for that to happen, I need to survive long enough to reach them." Adam exhaled sharply, shaking his head. This was insane. He had spent his entire life avoiding war, avoiding conflicts that weren't his. And now, somehow, he had been dragged into an interstellar rebellion led by a dethroned alien queen. He should have walked away, should have told her that he didn't sign up for this. But he didn't. Because when he looked at her, at the fierce determination in those glowing green eyes, he knew she wasn't just chasing a lost cause. She was the last hope of an empire. And, against every instinct, he was starting to believe in her. The ship drifted in the vast emptiness of space, a small speck against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside, Adam leaned over the central control panel, staring at the glowing holographic display that flickered with maps, battle strategies, and encrypted transmissions from across the galaxy. He never thought he'd be here, in the heart of an interstellar rebellion, standing beside a dethroned queen. And yet, here he was. Sera stood on the opposite side of the room, her fingers gliding over the illuminated console as she decrypted a new transmission. Her expression was unreadable, but Adam had learned to see past the stoic mask she often wore. She was tense, on edge, her shoulders rigid as she scanned the message. Whatever it said, it wasn't good news. "They're closing in," she murmured. "Black Sun's forces are tightening their patrols. They know I'm alive." Adam exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. "Figured as much. We've been making a lot of noise." Sera turned to him, her glowing green eyes searching his face. "You don't have to do this, Adam. This isn't your fight." He let out a dry chuckle. "You keep saying that, but somehow I keep finding myself in the middle of it." And it was true. What had started as a simple act of survival, keeping her alive long enough to escape, had turned into something much bigger. He had seen the transmissions, the desperate calls from resistance fighters still loyal to Sera's name. He had watched the fear in their eyes turn to hope when they realized their queen was still breathing. They were waiting for a leader. And Sera, whether she was ready or not, was the only one who could give them that. The problem was, hope alone wouldn't win this war. Adam pushed off the console and straightened. "So, what's the plan? We can't just sit here waiting for them to find us." Sera studied him for a moment, then turned back to the display, swiping her hand across the glowing map. The projection shifted, revealing a scattered network of outposts, hidden bases, and isolated strongholds. Each one represented a potential ally. "We gather what forces we can," she said. "There are still those who remember the truth, who will fight for Valeria if given the chance. But they need to know we're real. They need proof." Adam folded his arms. "And let me guess. Getting that proof means putting ourselves in a hell of a lot more danger." Sera's lips twitched, almost a smile. Would you expect anything else? He shook his head, but there was no hesitation in his voice when he said, Then let's do it. The next few days were a whirlwind of movement. The small crew they had gathered, a mix of defectors, smugglers, and former Valyrian warriors, worked tirelessly, securing safe passage through hostile sectors and reaching out to old allies. Adam found himself at the center of it all, learning the ins and outs of guerrilla warfare in a galaxy where every move could mean life or death. At first, he had felt like an outsider, just another human caught in a war that wasn't his. But that changed the moment they landed on Jaren Prime. The outpost was a crumbling relic of the old empire, hidden in the deep canyons of the planet's scarred surface. It was one of the last strongholds of the Resistance, and if they could convince its people to join them, it would be a turning point in the war. But Black Sun had already been there first. The devastation was immediate. Smoke curled from the ruins, and bodies littered the streets. Soldiers, civilians, all caught in the crossfire. The few survivors that remained were barely holding on, their weapons low, their eyes hollow with defeat. Sera stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over what had once been a thriving outpost. There was something heavy in her expression, something Adam had seen before in soldiers who had come back to find everything they had fought for reduced to ash. She clenched her fists. Cain did this. Adam didn't need to ask who she meant. He had heard the name enough to know that Darius Cain was more than just a traitor. He was a butcher. And he wasn't just trying to wipe out the last of Sera's supporters. He was trying to erase her legacy. Adam's grip on his rifle tightened. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but at some point, this had stopped feeling like someone else's war, and it had become his, too. That night, as they sat around a dimly lit strategy table in what was left of the command center, Adam found himself standing beside Sera as they mapped out their next move. She pointed to the holographic display. We have one shot at this. If we can get to the central relay station and broadcast a message across the network, we can show the entire empire that Valyria still has a queen. Adam nodded. And Cain won't let that happen without a fight. A beat of silence stretched between them. Then Sera looked at him, something raw and unspoken in her gaze. I meant what I said before. You don't have to be part of this. Adam held her gaze, and for the first time, he realized something. He wasn't fighting for a cause. He was fighting for her. I'm in, he said simply. Sera nodded once, her expression unreadable. But in her eyes, he saw something that hadn't been there before. Trust. And maybe, just maybe, something more. The battlefield was chaos. Smoke and fire painted the ruins of the once grand capital of Valyria, and the sky above burned with streaks of energy as ships clashed in a brutal aerial war. The deafening roar of explosions mixed with the sharp electric hum of plasma fire, creating a symphony of destruction. Adam moved through the shattered remains of the palace courtyard, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands, every step fueled by sheer determination. His body ached, his breaths were ragged, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. They had made it this far, fought through Black Sun's defenses, stormed the stronghold, and cut their way to the heart of Cain's regime. But the fight wasn't over yet. Sera was ahead, battling through the last of the enemy's elite guard. She moved like a storm, her energy blades slicing through the air with deadly precision. The intricate lines on her violet skin pulsed with light, her eyes burning with something fierce and unrelenting. She had come for what was hers, and nothing would stand in her way. But then Adam saw it. Too late. A soldier hidden among the wreckage lifted a high-powered energy rifle, his scope locked onto Sera. Adam didn't think. He acted. He lunged forward, pulling her away just as the shot rang out. Agony tore through his side. The force of the blast sent him crashing to the ground, his vision exploding into white-hot pain. He barely registered the sound of Sera's voice calling his name, barely felt her hands gripping his shoulders. He had been shot before. He knew what it felt like. But this was different. The energy blast seared through flesh and bone, and a coldness spread through him, numbing his limbs. He tried to move, but his body refused to listen. Sera was suddenly there, kneeling beside him, her face hovering over his, her glowing eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before. Fear. "Stay with me," she commanded, pressing her hands over the wound. Adam tried to smirk, but it came out as a weak grimace. "Didn't think I'd be the one going down first." Sera didn't laugh. Instead, her hands began to glow. The air around them shifted, charged with something unseen but powerful. A low hum filled the space between them, and Adam felt it. A presence. Something ancient. Something beyond comprehension. Her eyes burned brighter, their glow intensifying until they were like twin stars. And for the first time, Adam felt the full weight of what she was. Not just a queen. Not just a warrior. Something more. She pressed her palm to his chest, directly over his heart, and the energy surged. A shockwave rippled through his body, not painful, but consuming. It wasn't just heat. It was life itself, flooding into him, rewriting something at his core. He gasped as his vision blurred, the pain vanishing, replaced by something different, stronger. When he opened his eyes, the world felt sharper, clearer. His limbs no longer ached, his chest no longer burned. He sat up too quickly, expecting dizziness, but there was none. Instead, he felt whole. And then he looked at her. Sera was watching him, her breathing uneven, her hands still trembling from whatever she had just done. The glow in her eyes dimmed slightly, but the intensity in them remained. "What did you do?" Adam murmured. She exhaled slowly, as if bracing herself for his reaction. "I told you," she whispered. "I would give you something no human woman ever could." Adam's pulse pounded in his ears. He could still feel the energy inside him, coursing through his veins, making his skin hum with something foreign but familiar. "I didn't just save your life, Adam," Sera said softly. "I gave you a new one." His hands clenched involuntarily, and for the first time he noticed the faintest glow beneath his skin. Just for a moment, before it faded. "You weren't supposed to die today," she continued. "You were supposed to stand beside me. And now you can." Realization sank in. She hadn't just healed him. She had changed him. Adam took a slow, unsteady breath. He should have been angry, should have been afraid. But instead, something settled deep inside him. A certainty. Because for the first time since this all began, he knew without a doubt. He belonged to this fight now, and he wasn't going anywhere. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and ash, the remnants of battle still lingering over the once mighty capital of Valeria. Fires smoldered in the distance, casting a flickering orange glow against the towering structures that had once belonged to Darius Kane's regime. But now, those walls bore the scars of war, crumbling under the weight of a rebellion that had refused to die. Adam stood at the highest balcony of the Grand Citadel, looking down upon a sight he never thought he would witness. Millions of people filled the city streets below, their voices a wave of rising energy that reverberated through the ruins of the fallen empire. Soldiers who had once served Kane now knelt, stripped of their banners, their weapons laid at their feet in surrender. Citizens who had lived in fear for too long now stood with their heads held high, their faces filled with something Adam hadn't seen in them before. Hope. Sera stood beside him, dressed in the ceremonial robes of her ancestors, the intricate symbols of her lineage glowing faintly along her arms and collarbone. The crown of Valeria, a gleaming circlet of dark metal entwined with flowing energy, rested against her violet skin, its power pulsing in sync with the life of the city below. She had won. Her people had reclaimed what was stolen from them. Darius Kane was dead. His reign of terror shattered into nothing more than dust and forgotten echoes. The army he had used to control Valeria now bent the knee. Not out of fear, but out of acceptance that their true ruler had returned. But even now, in the moment of her greatest victory, Sera did not move to stand alone. She turned toward Adam, her green, glowing eyes searching his face. And in that instant, he knew. This wasn't just her triumph. It was his too. From the moment she had appeared at his doorstep in the frozen wastelands of Alaska, his life had been spiraling toward this moment. He had been a man with nothing, a man running from the weight of a past he could not escape. And yet, somehow, against all reason, he had become part of something far greater than himself. A warrior, a leader, a legend. And now, he was about to become something more. Sera took a step forward, reaching for his hand. Adam felt the warmth of her skin against his, the same energy that had once saved his life now radiating between them. He didn't resist when she pulled him closer, guiding him toward the edge of the balcony where the entire world was waiting. She lifted their joined hands high. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar. "From now on, this person will rule Valeria with me." Her voice carried across the capital, amplified by the energy fields embedded within the palace. The words rang through the city, through every speaker and transmission system still functioning. There was no mistaking their meaning. The people had regained their queen. And now, they had a king. Adam barely had time to process it before the weight of the moment settled around him. He wasn't Valerian. He wasn't born into this empire, nor had he spent his life fighting for it the way these people had. But it didn't matter. Because he had fought beside them. He had bled for them. And now, he would stand with them. He turned to Sera, his blue eyes locking onto hers. There was a flicker of amusement in her expression, but beneath it was something deeper, something real. "You could have given me a little warning," he muttered under his breath. Her lips curved into the smallest smirk. "Would you have accepted it?" Adam exhaled, shaking his head slightly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed her hand tighter, feeling the steady pulse of her energy against his skin. Maybe he wasn't meant for a quiet life in the wilderness. Maybe, just maybe, this was where he was always meant to be. The people below continued to cheer, their voices merging into one unified cry of triumph. The banners of Cain's fallen empire were torn down, replaced by the sigil of Valeria that now flew high above the city. Ships hovered in the skies, their lights shining like stars, as the news spread across the system. Valeria had been reborn, and its rulers stood together. Sera stepped closer, her voice lower now, meant only for him. "You once told me you didn't believe in fate." Adam glanced down at their entwined hands, then back at the vast city that stretched out before them. "Maybe I was wrong." She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something in her eyes that had nothing to do with war or duty. Peace. Then, before he could say anything more, she did something that sent another shockwave through the crowd. She kissed him. It wasn't calculated or rehearsed. It wasn't meant as a political move or a show of power. It was real. Fierce. Unstoppable. And Adam, for once, didn't fight it. The moment stretched, charged with an intensity that neither of them could deny. When she finally pulled back, he was breathless, and she was smirking. "Still think I was lying?" she murmured. Adam let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Guess not." The Empire cheered, their voices reaching up to the heavens, and so began the reign of the warrior queen and the man who had once been nothing more than a ghost. Now, he was so much more. Now, he was king. The battle is over, the tyrant has fallen, and Valeria has a queen once more. But Sera does not stand alone. In front of millions, she takes Adam's hand and declares, "From this moment on, he will rule beside me." A human, once lost, now a legend. The first of his kind, a warrior, a king, and the man who changed the fate of an empire. But this is just the beginning. What price did he pay for love? What secrets still linger in the stars? What would you do if an alien queen offered you the universe? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to Alien Love Chronicles and be part of the adventure. Let's reach 1,000 subs together and keep creating the most breathtaking alien love stories.